What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah. Today I invite you to pull up a chair, grab a snack, maybe even a tasty beverage, and let me talk at you for a minute. Today I have the distinct pleasure to talk to you about Kill Sample Process. Kill Sample Process is in the same family of games as Forbidden Psalm and Last War. Same author, same mechanics, all of that good kind of stuff. There are some slight modifications to warband creation and gameplay and stuff, but to account for setting for things like cybernetics and stuff like that. So there are some things that appear here that don't at least don't in Forbidden Psalm. I've not played Last War. I've not really read through Last War. It just recently occurred to me that I could definitely use my Krieg army for Last War. So it's on my radar, but I haven't played it yet. But I love Cyberpunk. Probably one of my favorite settings, even though it looks like we might be living in a dystopian cyberpunk reality soon. For now, it's still fiction, and while it's still fiction, it's probably one of my favorite kinds of fiction. But before I talk at you, there's one thing that I guess I want to talk at you. Before I talk at you, and that's I want to say welcome and thank you to Dustin Bainbridge, our newest Patreon pledger. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and enjoying I'm so grateful and just filled with joy that you enjoyed the content enough to want to contribute to help keeping it going. You, sir, are an absolute rock star. I love the gritty, dark, desperate nature of it. Movies like Blade Runner and stuff just snatched up my imagination when I was young, and it has stuck with me. And Cyberpunk is really truly supposed to be dark, gritty, ugly, violent, addicted, awful place. Unless you have the creds to live the good life. And I think this game does a really good job of setting that type of desperate dystopian future. So we open up in the book with just this. This is the cover of the book. No words, just this eye staring out at you from the bookshelf. The rest of the book, the art and layout is very similar to the Forbidden Psalm book. We have very straightforward, quick, easy to read layouts. But there's also, because of the type font, I guess, whatever it's called used, I'm not a layout person. I'm a sometimes illustrator, artist, creative person. I'm not a layout creative type of person. But some of the pages give me absolute anxiety just because of the way the font and the layout is on the page. And I don't hate that. I don't hate it at all. The art in the book is on par with what we see in the other games. Here's a really cool one. Just that simple black line, kind of pen and ink style over that bright yellow background. It's very, very, very nice. We'll jump back to the mob section. That's where we get some of the really look at this police drone. Outstanding. Blood just dripping off his baton. And then gangers. Like the art style definitely lends itself to conveying that dark. This is one of my favorites. I love how this thing probably shouldn't be able to stand up, but it does. Just shambling biomechanical mess. And I love it. So as we go into the book, obviously we have our table of contents, our what you need, measuring devices, dice rolls, which you need your full polyhedral dice set. So break out those D20s, 12s, 10s, 8s, 6s, and 4s for this cyberpunk adventure. Everything's measured in inches, modifiers in the game stack, all the basic stuff you need to know and what you need to get ready. Now, the next page I like a lot because it gives you a chart for converting from other Forbidden Psalm books, as well as the Cyborg RPG, which is the Mork board cyberpunk RPG, OSR type RPG is my understanding. And they can be used in this game with the conversion. And it gives you like gold and resources or to creds, kind of your language and parameter stuff. All costs in this game are in creds, as they should be with any cyberpunk world. Manuscripts and scrolls, if you have those if you're bringing over from Forbidden Psalm, those convert into programs. Your armor, that's for converting from the RPG, which I'm not doing. But it allows you, like, if you have armor items from Cyborg, how to convert them over to this game. And then you have the option for bringing over a warband for Forbidden Psalm, which I think is cool, because in one of the last missions in the Forbidden Psalm book, your crew, spoiler alert, sorry, your crew steps through a portal to another realm. So there's nothing saying that you couldn't play the Forbidden Psalm book campaign, and then they step through that portal and arrive here in this. After that little conversion, chart or spiel and paragraphs sections, whatever we want to call them, we come into your creating a crew section, which, as always, I'm not going to talk about too in depth in this video. We'll see that when we do our creating a crew video. However, I will say that it works very, very, very much the same as it does in Forbidden Psalm. It's a very straightforward. You got 2 D100 charts for names, some special operators that you can have, your stat lines. Your stat lines are the same kind of +3, +1, 0, -10. Assign them accordingly. It's very much the same thing. So the next thing that I want to touch on are cyber mods. Because what is a cyberpunk dystopia without insane body modification? It's not cyberpunk. That's what it would be. Now, there are not an enormous number of cyber mods, especially compared to some other cyberpunk games. But you got all your basic stuff covered. Your arm blades, heads-up displays in your eyes. They're broken into 5 categories. So you have ones that affect your combat prowess, weaponry. You have ones that affect your brain, ones that affect your vision, ones that affect your movement or body, and then you have defense mods. Now, the cool thing about them is that if you use them and you roll a fumble, which would be a 1 on your D20, bad things can happen to you. So it's kind of, in that aspect, a little bit like using a spell in Forbidden Psalm. And some of the things that can happen range from, like, it just completely breaks, to it gains a flawed status, or it self-replicates and you get a new cyber mod for free. So there's good and bad things that can happen, and I like that kind of variability where it's just, all right, this could suck real bad, but at the same time, it could be really, really sweet too. Now, while this game does not run in the vein of my favorite type of cyberpunk, which is cyber fantasy, so your Shadowrunny type stuff where you have magic and stuff, it does have some mutations and things that can happen from either just, I guess, intentional genetic engineering down to just being exposed to massive amounts of pollution or drugs or chemicals or any number of things. So you do have some things like Croc, where you gain a bite, and obviously I assume you would look like Croc from DC Comics, and cat eyes or being telekinetic. So there are some things that are not just straight humanity with an overabundance and over-reliance on technology, which I like because it gives you a little bit more flair, a little bit more variety. It also increases that darkness, horror type feel that you want to create in this type of setting, and I'm here for that. I've also got some really cool models in plan that I plan to use for my warband that I'm really excited to show y'all when we get to the Creating a Crew video. Next, we come to our weaponry, and there is a large variety of weaponry ranging from broken beer bottles all the way up to electric assault rifles and arc guns and cyber crossbows and things like that. So whatever kind of cyberpunk models you happen to have laying around, you're going to be able to equip them with what they have given what's in this chart. For sure. For sure. We also have some things like flamethrowers and cyber swords, and then there's a chart for rolling random weapons that runs a D100 if you just really want to get buck wild with it. We also have cost for ammo and psi ammo and some different kinds of special rounds like stun rounds, EM rounds, emo rounds, bio rounds, nano rounds, gravity rounds, and morphine rounds. A down model gets up and gains 1 HP. That's pretty sweet. Here, let me shoot you with some dope. Next, we come up on a part of a rule book that I love to see, and I feel that for some reason I don't see it as often as I would like to. And that is the section where you just have all of your keywords and your states and all of that stuff in one place. Easy to find and reference when you need to know what's going on. Next, you have programs, which are the equivalent to spells. It's what kind of apps and things that you can do. Programs work very, very similar to how spells work in Forbidden Psalm. You have a knowledge test instead of a presence test, but it's pretty much the same thing. If a bad thing happens, there is a system crash chart to roll a d20 on and see what kind of bad things happen to you. Then we come into the how to play the game. How do you actually deal with moving these things around the table? And it's very straightforward, much like Forbidden Psalm. You pick your scenario, set up your table, determine your conditions, deploy as per your scenario rules, determine who's going to get the first initiative, and then you go into the game. So gameplay goes initiative phase, activation phase between either the solo player or the co-op players or the adversarial players. Roll a dice, high roll gets to choose. Then your hostiles, if there's any in play, then you end the game round, go to the next model. Go to the next round. 20 is a crit, 1 is a fumble. That applies differently to different things, but it matters, so pay attention to it. I've messed up a couple of times with that, and I just try to do better because that's about all I can do. When you go to activate a model, it is back and forth. So I would activate a model, then my opponent would activate a model, and then back and forth. Or my partner would activate a model, back and forth. When you do that, you can move and take an action. You must move before taking an action. And once you take an action, you're done with that model. With your action, you can ranged attack, melee attack, pick up stuff, use a program, mutation cyber mod, drag a down model within an inch, interact with stuff, or make a second move as an action. So just like Forbidden Psalm, very straightforward, no long, super crazy, detailed list of actions to keep up with. It's all pretty straightforward. And I like that because it makes the game easy to pick up and play. These games at least I'm assuming this is going to be much like Forbidden Psalm in the length of the game, can be very, 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 very quick. And I like it because you can sit down for a session, you play 3 or 4 missions. And that's great because there's lots of other content out there for them. And that's good too. Combat and ranged combat are very straightforward as well. Your maximum range for ranged is 12 inches. And you roll your d20. You're looking for your standard, your DR12 is the go-to number. You're adding the appropriate stat modifier based on the weapon. So some weapons will use your agility, some will use your strength, etc., etc. And then if you hit, you hit. Roll the appropriate damage dice and apply damage to the model, accounting for their armor or any damage reduction special stuff that they may have. Now in close combat, just like in Forbidden Psalm, if you hit them, they get to swing back at you at a -3. In shooting, when you shoot at something, you can shoot into a combat, but you get a -3 to hit with those ranged weapons. You also have to keep up with your ammo in this game, which is also a thing in Forbidden Psalm, but in Forbidden Psalm I've yet to really use any ranged weapons in my party, so it's an aspect that I haven't kept up with a whole lot. However, in this game I'm sure that I will need to because I want some firepower, some goons. As in Forbidden Psalm, criticals always cause max damage, and if you want to leave combat, the person or entity that you are in combat with, if it's an opponent, they can choose. But if it's a monster, a hostile on the board, it'll always try to keep you in combat. And it does that by making a DR12 agility test. And if it passes, you cannot move. On a failure, you move up to your movement value and take no further action. And on a fumble, you can move and take an action. And on a critical, the opponent or hostile gets to make an attack against you. When you drag a model, it cuts your movement in half, and you can only take move actions. Guts tests are a presence test, and on a failure, you would flee the board. You must take a gut check when you are critically hit, or when you strike a downed enemy, as the remorse of murdering someone just kind of overcomes you, and you have to deal with that and process with that. And sometimes that means getting the heck out of Dodge and going to a safe place for yourself. And then in a somewhat random place, I feel like this page would probably be better suited back in the crew creation section, but it gives you a D100 chart that you can roll on twice to get a name for your crew. So your crew could be like the Diplomatic Knight, or the Slim Worms, or the Luck Venoms, or so, just a random crew name. If you don't already have a crew name that you want to use or anything like that, I will most likely be carrying over my crew name. Not necessarily the crews, but probably the crew name for or from Forbidden Psalm, because I really like it. We then come into something else that no cyberpunk dystopian fantasy world would be without, and that's drugs. So we have a list of 12 different narcotics that you can take that apply and will give you different buffs and bonuses for a scenario. However, there's always a risk in taking these types of things. So you can take as many as you want, but when you take them, you have to make a toughness test at DRX. And X is equal to the number of drugs you've taken times 5. So if you're only taking one drug, you just got to beat a 5. But if you're taking 3 drugs, you got to beat a 15. So you kind of need to, all things in moderation. Don't go crazy with it. Just pick 1 or 2 that you might really like and what they do for you, and go with that. Because if you fail, you get -1 to a random stat, which is bad enough. However, if you fumble, you are just down. You just drop to 0 HP, and they got to get some Narcan or some whatever into your system. Next, after the drugs, we have an incident report, which is kind of a walkthrough step of some gameplay, which is a nice thing to include. I always appreciate stuff like that because it can help wrap your brain around it. We then come to glitches, which are the equivalent of your omens from Forbidden Psalm. It's 6 things that you can do. It's deal maximum damage with a weapon, reroll any dice, yours or someone else's, remove a down model from play and have it auto pass the death save, cancel a crit or a fumble, reroll on the loot table, or automatically pass a test. It's the exact same 6 things, they just have different names. In this game, they're called Maximum Effort, Deja Vu, Insurance, Meta, Connected, and Deus Ex Machina. We then come to Hostiles and their AI. Now, the hostile AI in this game is a little bit more, I would say, than in Forbidden Psalm. So we have these full-on flowcharts, which I need to go into the PDF and just print out just these 2 pages. But it starts with checking their special rules, see that can it see a model of the same type as it? No. If it can, then it goes, if it's within an inch. If it is, then it'll attack. If it's not, then it'll have check for a ranged attack. So maybe it's about the same as in Forbidden Psalm. It's just been laid out in this nice flowchart as opposed to being a list. And I do like that, because once you kind of the flowchart for me is, for some reason, I think easier to convert to my memory than just a list of things. Unless it's a very, very short list, like in a game, like in Joe McCullough's games for like Rangers and Stargate. Like those AIs are very, 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 very simple. But the AI for a game like Chromehammer Ascension, however, which is another cyberpunk game, cyber fantasy game, that one is much more complex. So having the flowchart to go through it is a lot easier for me. Next, we come into the Hostiles proper section of the book, where we're talking about how the monsters interact, how we randomly generate them, what they do on a fumble. They're always on a D12 for their DR D12. They're always on a difficulty rating 12 for all their checks. They don't really have stat modifiers and things like that unless they've been hit by a program or something that would give them a stat modifier, I assume. If they're ever critically hit, if they have a guts check, they have to make a guts test. So they roll 2d6, And if it is above their guts rating, they flee the field, moving 2d6 inches per round until it leaves the field or is killed. If their guts stat, however, is a dash, then they ignore guts checks and just keep on coming. On their profiles, you have their HP, their guts, their attack, and their armor. So very straightforward stat line for the monsters. When you randomly spawn one, you spawn it according to the scenario rules, so there's no dead set. It goes here this way. Just check your rules for the scenario, and it'll tell you exactly where to put your monsters, your bad guys. Any items carried by a hostile can be picked up as an action. So if they've got an arc rifle and you kill them, then you can pick up that arc rifle and take it with you. If they roll a 1, they drop their weapon unless it's something like claws that is attached to their body. If they have no weapon, then they'll spend actions to pick up said weapons. And then we have a chart for the numbers for like how many to spawn at various times, which is great to have this for gameplay purposes, but also for preparatory purposes, because it lets you know how many of a given model type you're going to need. So like for cyber rats, you would spawn 1 in solo play. The enforcer chart, you check that specifically. That's like the law coming at you. Gangers, you spawn 1. Rad ghouls, you would spawn 2. Mutants are 1. Nano infested are 2. Washbots are 2. A machine god is only ever 1 on a big 50. And it gives you their base sizes, which most are on a 25 mil, but at the same time, if you're playing, if you got it on a 32, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal per se. I don't think it'd be a problem. So if you've already got stuff that's base and it's maybe base a little bit bigger than a 25 mil or 32 mil, I think you're probably going to be fine. The fun police definitely aren't going to come kicking your door. Then we come into our actual mob stat lines and all that stuff. So we start off with the enforcers, which come in. What you get from there is based on your wanted level, which is something we'll be discussing in a few minutes. So we have our enforcers, and they come in different varieties from drones, grunts, officers, camera drones, SWAT teams, and then a big 209 mech. All of which I have models for the SWAT team, and I have models for the grunts. Everything else I have files for, but I'm in the process of printing them out and getting them painted up. Probably just going to do a quick speed paint slap chop on them, get them on the table ready to cause some problems for me. Then we have the Machine God, which is a giant HP 40 terrifying monstrosity of a creature. Absolutely horrifying. It's kind of like this game's version of the Corpse Collector, I guess, but it's big and absolutely terrifying. With gangers, they come in 4 flavors. So when you roll for gangers for a mission, whichever type you get, all the gangers you get for that mission will be from that type of gang. And they are the Negligence Facade, the Guerrilla Malice Galere. I'm not sure how to say that word. Gallery. I don't know. The GMG. They are the Resonance Cascade and the Troglodytes. Each one has a slightly different stat line and equipment weapons that they use. We then have the Unmet, which are basically cyber psychos. They've just gone absolutely bonkers. We have the Nano Infested, who've been obviously infested by nanobots. And when they die, they release a swarm of nanobots, which I think is pretty sweet. We have Radiation Ghouls, or Rad Ghouls, as they are known. Washerbots, Psy-Rats, good old Mutants, the Cult of the Flesh, which are people who are on this cosmetic growth hormone chemical substance drug, and they're just really into seeing what it does to their bodies. Your scenarios can be less than 6, probably for some of the scenarios, but usually they play over 6 rounds of play. And in the scenario, you'll have your goal, what you're trying to accomplish. You'll have the map, the deployment, any monsters that you're going to need. Plays on a 2x2, so again, a small footprint game, which I'm a big fan of because it's easy to set up, easy to tear down. You don't have to have as much terrain. Now, I have a fairly huge terrain collection. Maybe not huge, but a pretty solid terrain collection. But if you don't have a huge terrain collection, it makes it easier to get into the game because there's less of an investment, because you don't need to fill a 6x4 or even a 4x4. You just got to fill a 2x2, which is, 2 or 3 buildings, some solid scatter, maybe a couple little fences or walls, and you're good to go. Next, we come to loot. So this is our D20 table of stuff that you can get when you pick up data or loot treasure. And then we come to that section that I was talking about a minute ago, the wanted level. So as already stated, your wanted level will determine what kind of enforcers are going to come after you. But how do you get a wanted level? Well, you start at 0. Nothing. You're just a scrub-ass rookie. Nobody knows who you are, and more importantly, nobody cares who you are. However, through your actions out here in these streets, things like completing a scenario, killing an enforcer hostile, or certain scenario objectives as detailed in the scenario will increase your wanted level by 1 for a mission and 1 for killing an enforcer, for each enforcer you kill. And then whatever you get from your mission. At a wanted level of 10, you get some bonuses. You get an extra 100 creds for every scenario you complete. And when you recruit new crewmates, they come with 1 random weapon. However, if you get to a wanted level of 25, you must select a crew member to take a fall, and they are incarcerated, locked away in a cube, and removed from your roster. You then drop your wanted level by 2d8, and you can pick up a new crew member for free. 0 recruitment cost. And I think that's a really neat system. I think it's a good way of representing the fact that you are a netrunner, or a shadow runner. You're doing things that are not legal to survive, and that's a good way of portraying it. And I'm really excited to see how that works out on the table. I'm sure it's going to be a blast. Then we come to table conditions, things that can be happening at the beginning of the game. And these are optional. I use them sometimes, and sometimes I don't. But we have things like acid rain, nanoswarms, a machine god, autocorrect, power outages, energy crises, heat waves, air quality advisories, and VR simulations. Darkness affects line of sight on the board. Then we come to our scenarios, which are laid out in a very straightforward manner across 2 pages, which I like. I like it when a scenario is easy to read, understand, and know what I'm doing. Sometimes, some games, I feel like the scenarios are, for whatever reason, I have to read them several times to really understand what it is that I'm doing or supposed to be doing, and I like it when I don't have to do that. Now, after you've played your scenario, of which there are 11, you have your post game, and it's pretty straightforward. You get 400 creds if you have at least 1 member survive. Then you take your death saves for anybody who went down, which is a difficulty rating 6 toughness test, so should be pretty passable. You can also pay the doc 100 creds to auto pass a death save and avoid rolling on that injury. You roll injuries on the injury tables. You can also pay a doc 250 creds for replacement parts to heal injuries. You can sell items to the fence, except for programs. Those cannot be sold. You increase your wanted level, and then you gain and spend your XP, which you get XP for killing hostiles, collecting loot, completing with at least 1 member surviving, models you down, death saves you passed, and crew members who died. You can spend 5 XP at a time to do 5 different things. You can improve an ability by 1. You can re-roll a flaw. You can gain a new feat. You can bring a crew member back from the dead, or if you do bring them back from the dead, they return with a flaw. Then we come to hiring new crew members and reallocating equipment. It also provides a little table for giving yourself a campaign score, which I'm most likely going to be playing my campaign as a solo excursion unless I scratch up an opponent to come play the game with me. But you get +5 for each model that made it all the way through the campaign, +5 for giving V the virus, and +1 for each antiquity that you gain. And antiquities are the equivalent of relics in this game. They're powerful things that you can use in game. And there are 12 of them. We then have injury. Hold on. Pause. Because I need to show you something on this antiquities chart. So number 7 on this chart is just this empty box that says place sticker of your choice here. If you have no sticker, re-roll. And I think that's hilarious. I think that's an awesome thing to be there. I like it goes back to the humor of these kinds of games. It's a dark humor, but it's entertaining nonetheless. After our antiquities, we have our injury chart, which are the different things that are going to happen on your injury rolls. We then come into crew rosters, campaign rosters. Nope, that's just more crew stuff. And then we've got some standees. I love that he includes these in his rule books. It's a great thing for accessibility. And then we come to one of my favorite things in a rule book, a solid, compact, and concise quick reference. I've said it so many times, I don't know why you would make a book and not put a quick reference in it. My brain does not compute that. It just doesn't. And that brings us to the back cover of Kill Sample Process. As of this moment, the game is only available in PDF format through Wargaming Vault or Drive-Thru RPG or whichever of the two. They're one bookshelf. And it ranges, I caught it on sale for like $9. I think the normal price is about $15, like $14.99. And I think it's well worth it. It's a beautifully laid out book. The gameplay is phenomenal. The opportunity to use cool cyberpunk models and play a really dark, grimy cyberpunk game is always an opportunity that I think you should jump at as a wargamer. But that's just my opinion. You don't have to have the same one as me, even though I think I'm right. Now, the author has said that at some point he does plan on getting the physical printing of the book available. And I assume it'll probably be the same price as the physical copies of Last War and Forbidden Psalm, which is about $40. And those books are beautiful. I don't own either of them because I bought PDFs of both of mine. But those books are absolutely beautiful. They're in that beautiful kind of like small format size. They're hardback. And they're just beautiful rule books. I would love to own them. But I have these, and these work just as well. As long as I have a physical copy in my hand. I do not like playing games from a PDF. I know some people love it, and that's fine. It's just not for me. Now, if you do not have anything at all in your collection that fits into this genre of gaming, but you want to give it a try, you want to try to, you're interested in cyberpunk games and you want to play some more of those, I think that Kill Sample Process is a great place to start building that aspect of your collection. Because A, your crew count is only 5 models. Your terrain, your board size is a very small footprint, 2x2. So as I mentioned earlier, you only need a few buildings and a little bit of scatter. And you don't need an enormous number of enemy models. But as with any kind of game like this where you have that, you do need some models. Now, there may be other things in your collection that you can repurpose. If you're starting fresh, then you may have to do some... If you have a printer, then you're going to be golden. If you're having to buy models, you may have to do some searching. For some reason, like sci-fi models are very, very, very easy to find. Cyberpunk models can be a little bit more difficult. Now, there's a lot of models from Corvus Belli for Infinity that work really, really, really well in a cyberpunk setting. And there's some of the models in those lines that are just way too futuristic to really fit in cleanly or appropriately to the setting, in my opinion. So that's one avenue. There's some pretty good stuff in the Reaper Bones lines. A lot of their models tend to skew a little bit more towards the cyber fancy, like my troll that I use, Felix Wellington, who was named after a Patreon. He comes from that line of models. So there are options out there. You just got to dig a little bit harder, I think, to find those really good fitting cyberpunk models. There are the models that they make for the Cyberpunk Red TTRPG. They come in three model blisters usually, and they're pretty pricey. They're about $20 US for 3 resin models, and they're really nice models. Don't get it twisted. They're nice models. But I don't know if they're $20 for 3 in a blister. I mean, they were nice enough that I bought like 2 blisters, but that was before I had my resin printer up and running. So I was also out there. I was scrounging around that. Wanting to play cyberpunk games was also one of the big reasons that I bought the resin printer that I have. Now, let's say you've already got a fair amount of modern to cyberpunk terrain and some good models, because let's say maybe you played Chromehammer Ascension, or maybe you played Exploit Zero, or maybe you played Reality's Edge or any of those other awesome Cyberpunk games, then this game's a no-brainer. You should absolutely, at the very least, spend your $9 to $15 for the PDF. Check it out. You're gonna have fun once you get it on the table. And then if you don't have models, he gives you the standees right there in the book. Print them on some cardstock, print them out, have a blast. I don't know what else to say. So since I don't really know what else to say, I'll say this. Thank you so much for stopping by, spending part of your day hanging out with me, letting me talk at you about kill sample process. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider hitting those buttons or checking out some of the links down in the description to Patreon or Redbubble. And most importantly, I hope you have an absolutely awesome and nerdy rest of your day. And as always, I'd like to say a big, huge, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our patrons who support us and pledge to us over on Patreon. You guys are the absolute best. If you enjoyed the content you saw here today and that's something that you would like to consider doing to help out the channel, go over there, check out the link in the description, check out the Patreon. There's a lot of cool stuff over there, including access to our Discord server, talk to me, hang out with me, talk about our work, what we got going on in the hobby, some shout outs, all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. And regardless of whether or not you do that, I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful that you decided to stop by and spend part of your day with me today, rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, may the dice be ever in your favor.